Mr. Pop.
The day the music died.
Good evening. I'm Ray Zink. A Yarmouthtown RCMP officer moves into action.
Yeah, go ahead, 5 months.
It's a typical night. One more investigation is begun into a property damage complaint. One from an average of $240 a year.
Go ahead.
In the county of Yarmouth, rural Mounties can expect about half that number.
For the second consecutive year, the Radio Dan has been won by CJLS, Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. They won with a documentary called The Victimizers, a report on vandalism. The news director is Ray Zink. Ray?
I certainly don't think that there's a greater appreciation a person can receive for simply doing one's job than to get such an award as this. And I think that is particularly significant for a very small market station like CJLS in Yarmouth. And I hope this is certainly an encouragement at the least for other stations that are small and perhaps medium size to prove to them at least that we too can contribute items of interest and quality to the industry, and that we get away from the reputation of simply chasing police cars and ambulances. On behalf of our station manager, Grant Wyman at CJLS, I thank you very much.
If you were a skilled bricklayer back in 1934, you could expect top wages at around $1 an hour for your time, whilst other skilled labor would have clocked in around 50 to 75 cents per hour. It wouldn't be another 20 years before the CBC launched television, so it was trusty print media and the infancy of radio as the main forms of communication, news, and entertainment. Gateway Broadcasting Co., owned by Laurie Smith, launched CJLS on April 1st, 1934. CJLS broadcasts with the power of a whopping 100 watts. The studios and transmitter were located on the top floor of the old Grant Hotel. In 1940, the station moved to its more familiar location for most of us at 222 Main Street. In 1981, they were on the move again, and this time to 328 Main Street, where they are today, giving them a more central location. With modern-day technology, social media, smartphones, and the internet, it's really hard to imagine the impact that huddling around the radio on a Saturday night would have had on families in those early years. Maybe there'd be news, maybe some music, but most importantly, there would be people they knew that graced the airwaves. The world and technology has changed so much over the years that behind the scenes of the broadcasts today don't resemble anything near what those early years would have been. One thing that has not changed, and it goes to the heart of what radio was and is community. Those of us of a certain age will remember the names Grant Wyman, Wayne Norman, Bruce Rainey, Chris Donchermont, Jim Grattan, and many others that were on the air. There were as many behind the scenes that helped make CJLS a success as there were on the air. CJLS was truly the heart of the community. Here we are 90 years later, and they're still going. The names have changed, the music, the advertisements, the technology, but the spirit has not. When Gary and I started our podcast back in February of 2021, we wanted to try to take a ride on the coattails of the legacy in local media. A legacy created by those folks long past, including Gary's mentor, Ray Zink, plus his colleagues and past owners, Chris Perry and Jerry Boudreau. We've chatted with many of the current staff as well, Hartley Reed, Kevin Northrup, who at the time was with Eastlink Community TV, and Chris Perry himself before his passing. We wanted to hear the stories of the days gone by and how their own journeys brought them to CJLS in our own little corner of the world. As you heard in our introduction, Ray made a notable impact. Time and time again, he won awards for his rock-solid journalism and through the magic of his storytelling, all done through the reporting of local news. Not bad for a small market station with a news staff at the time of 1.5. In a conversation with Ray's wife Louise and daughter Rhonda, we heard how Ray ended up in Yarmouth, and in an interview that Ray did with the CBC in the late 1990s, We hear from Ray himself on his vision for community radio.
Ray went off to Dalhousie University and got his Bachelor of Commerce, and he decided, his older brother has a Bachelor of Commerce as well, and Ray decided, this is not what I want to do, and his brother offered him to go into business with him, and Ray said, no, I'm not interested in that at all. He said, I'm going off to Toronto. I told his mother and dad, I'm going off to Toronto to take journalism. And his mother thought, well, he'll come to his senses. So off he went to journalism school in Toronto, and he never looked back. He went to CFDR, and he worked there. Ray came to CJLS and worked for a bit, and then went back to CFDR, and came back to CJLS, and then he went out to Nelson, BC, was a news director there, and then came back to CJLS and settled down. Every time something happened or something was going on, you know, he would just leave, just take off. Sometimes he wouldn't even tell me, he'd just go. Something was going on. And he loved his community, and he loved to tell the people what was going on in his community, and the community really supported him in the end as well.
I learned many, many lessons from Dad. And so that was my thing. I was talking with my son last night, and I said, you got to do this right, you got to do this right, you got to do this right. This is how things are done in a progression. And I said, I learned that from my dad. Like, things have a place, things, but he was always caring and loving. He taught us that education was extremely important. He valued that piece, that if we're ever to move on from life, we need to get a good education and listen to people. He taught us to be kind, that type of thing. He was a very caring, loving dad, very supportive in everything that we did. I was in soccer and basketball, and he was at all my games. So very, very supportive.
In an interview with CBC, Ray told us his vision for what a community radio station should be.
You have a group of people in a community, plus their most basic need to communicate equals radio. What you have to do is to have radio then respond to that need to communicate in the community, but you must do that in an engaging way. You must be there in the studio and on the street in the community to deliver that communication need at the community level. And that's what we do here. I think that what we do best is what we call real-time radio, live broadcasting. And for radio to work for me, it must be in your face, and I think that's what we do here. I think when you have the commitment to the community, it extends to your workload in the station. It's more than just a job. It's your commitment to the community. So I think when you extend it to that level, what you end up with is a lot of work, hopefully quality work, and it seems to work. I'm a resident here. The radio station is a corporate citizen. We have an investment that goes beyond just making money and trying to employ people. I think that it's, if we can put it this way, a higher calling in terms of what we do here. We're very unique. The privilege that we have as a radio station to communicate back to the community, I think, is a very unique opportunity to serve your community, and I think that's what we're trying to do here. I think we must all do something more than just make money in life. Obviously, as a private corporation, we have to make a profit. But that will flow from your commitment to the community. If you serve the community, they will show you that loyalty back. Actually, it all comes down to loyalty.
In a chat with Gary and I prior to his passing, former owner Chris Perry related to us how he came to arrive in Yarmouth and finding a home at Radio CJLS.
Chris, your name has been synonymous with Radio CJLS, certainly for many, many years. What is your earliest memory? How did you come to be at CJLS?
Well, I was getting discharged from the military because of health issues. It wasn't because I didn't like the military. On the contrary, I rather liked it. But I had asthma, and I couldn't do the duties that I was required to do as an operator in the Signal Corps. When I finally took my discharge, I put out what they call an audition tape. I peppered Eastern Ontario and Nova Scotia. And I particularly signaled out CJLS at the time because I used to come to Middleton and go up to Zwickers Lake when I was a kid to a cottage, and I had the opportunity to come down to Yarmouth and hear the radio station, and it sounded like it had not particularly my sound, but certainly it was some place that I knew. So I fired off an audition tape to CJLS, and the general manager, Grant Wyman, whom many people will still remember fondly, and Ross Burchell, who was the program director at the time. Ross had arrived at CJLS, let me see, 1971, I believe. This was April 1972 when Ross and Grant hired me. And the rest is a 45-year odyssey at CJLS. At a small radio station like CJLS particularly, back in those days, you pretty much had to do everything. They needed another salesperson to work with Jerry Boudreau, who was the sales manager. And Jerry and I went out and we went to town, so to speak, looking for more advertising, and we built the station up with the efforts of a lot of people to make it a more contemporary station, if you will.
The half-staff person at the time in the news department was none other than Gary Nickerson. My late colleague spent countless hours lending his unmistakable voice to credible news reporting of our area. He too won many awards and peer recognition for his own brand of storytelling, and with Ray Zink as his mentor, his success was almost a given. His voice was unmistakably recognizable. In one of our early podcasts on the state of local media, he recounted his journey into the studios of Radio CJLS and onto the airways. Over the next 35-plus years, we all benefited from his passion.
The radio, like many households, was on all the time, and I love listening to the radio, and I love listening to the news for whatever reason. So when I was about, I'm going to say around 11 years old, one Christmas or birthday, I can't remember which, my father bought me a little radio set that you could put together like a little kit.
Oh, yes.
The only thing it would pick up was CJLS, which was only only AM at the time, 1340. So I would listen. I would listen to, Wayne Norman deliver the news. I'd listen, of course, to Ray Zink and others. And my mother had given me, to do my homework, a nice desk that her father had made. So I would do my homework, of course, but then I would turn on the radio and I'd listen, and then the same year I also they gave me a tape recorder, a little something a kid could use, with a little microphone that you'd plug in. So I took the microphone and I taped it to a ruler, and I kind of taped that to the desk. It was like a microphone of the radio station, and I would, read newspapers and pretend to read the news. And so I told my father one day, I said, I'd really like to work at the radio station. I don't know, and I was still very young, probably maybe at that time, 16 or so. I don't know what to do. And I used to see the guys come in. I used to see Chris Perry come in, and I used to see Ray Zink come in, and to me they were heroes because I would listen to them on the radio each day, and they'd stop into my dad's hardware store and all of that. And my father said, well, just stop in one day and see if they have any jobs. Maybe they need their windows cleaned. Maybe they need their floors swept. Right? That kind of thing. So I got my nerve up one day and I walked in. Jean Doucette was working at the front desk. That was at the old 222 Main Street. There's a restaurant there now. And and I was very nervous. And I said, I'm wondering if there's any jobs. And have a seat. And I sat, and Chris Perry came out. And he was very nice, he spoke to me, and he said, well, you're interested in radio? Yeah. And he gave me a couple of booklets, from the CAB, Canadian Association of Broadcasters, looking for a career in radio. and so I left, and I figured I'm never going to hear from him again. When I was in grade 11, I got a call from Chris at home. And he said, are you still interested in working at the radio station? I said, we've got a part-time position that's coming up. Weekends at the time was, let me see, Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. And I was so excited. And I said, yeah, absolutely. We said, you're going to school. You got to keep your schoolwork up. He said, I'm going to talk to your father. He said, to make sure it's okay with him, right? Which he did. And that's how I started. So I worked part-time through part of grade 11, which would have been in 77, late 77, and through grade 12. And then a year or two later, I was hired on full-time, and I worked night shift. And I wanted to work in the newsroom. I like being on the air and playing the records, and yes, we played records then, vinyl. But because I would go in every day, and I would watch Ray Zink, and I would watch his concentration on it, watch how he would write his stories, and it would just amaze me. I want to do that. I want to be like him. The first time that I saw Ray, God rest his soul, he had long hair down to his shoulders.
I can't imagine that.
No,
okay.
And a cigarette hanging out of his lips. Ray didn't smoke much, and he quit years and years and years ago. And I remember that it's burned into my memory of him sitting there just typing away on the old manual typewriter and the old reel-to-reel, queuing it up for a cut, and the old cut and splice, right? And I learned everything from Ray, everything, and so much more from everyone at the station.
In the same CBC interview as Ray, Jerry Boudreau and Chris Perry both shared their take on what community radio has meant for them.
All three of us worked in radio for many years. Ray most continuously, but all three had worked at CJLS, and Chris and I had gone off on our own and had continued to do work in radio, so we were always interested. We had always displayed an interest in keeping the radio station local, and I think all three of us were of the same mind in terms of the way we felt that the direction radio was taken in many areas was not what we wanted to see. We wanted radio to be very involved with the community. That's not always the case. And we saw an opportunity to both get involved in a business and do something we thought should be done with radio.
Jerry is a Wedgeport native, Ray from Bridgewater. I'm from Ottawa, but I've made my home here since the very early 70s. And this is my home now. So it was a business opportunity. It was an opportunity to work back in the business that we loved. If, in my opinion, people only wanted to hear 12 in a row, uninterrupted, 50 minutes nonstop music, they'd pull out their cassette or their CD player, stick a little button in their ear, and listen to it. They listen to radio because it's supposed to communicate something to them more than just music. We don't play 14 in a row. We'll play 2, maybe 3 in a row, take a stop break for some commercials, a community event that's maybe going on, a little bit of tidbit of news, a bulletin board item, or whatever have you, and then get back to another couple of selections of music. I think private radio will be here as long as people want to hear what's going on in their community. And I don't care whether it becomes a digital event on the internet or whether it's something that is broadcast on the air as we do today in whatever format it may take. People will always want to know what's going on in their community, and because you can't watch television while you drive, and you can't watch television in the bathtub, and you can't watch television in a myriad of other places,
radio will always be a primary and very important and integral link to the community.
Hartley Reid's journey onto the airwaves took a couple of turns before he became a traditional employee.
It goes back to the 90s. It goes back to about 1997. 96, 97. It goes back that far. Back in 1997, CJLS had a program that started on Saturday nights called the Pier 1 Dance Party. And it was hosted by Pier 1 Magazine. Pier 1 Magazine was a company that were located in the Pier 1 complex on Water Street. The guys that were involved in that particular show had approached Chris Perry, who at the time was not the owner of CJLS. Chris and Ray did not, and Jerry did not take ownership, I think, until 1999. So along the 97, 98 lines, I was approached and asked if they could borrow some music from me for the show. And I said, yeah, okay, sure. So I put together some music for them, CDs and whatnot. And at the time, Sean McClellan was the operator. So what they did was they sat over in a studio. Sean had CD players, and they give him CDs and he would play, because the music was supposed to reflect not what the radio station played, but a little something different. You know, edgier, still top 40, still within the format somewhat of the radio station. So as Saturday nights went on, I was asked, do you want to, can we still board? I said, can I be part of the show? If you want my music, I want to be a part of the show. So I started to become a part of the show. So I would come in, sit down, and with Brent Labelt, Brent was the main host of the show, and I would sit with Brent. Brent and I would read different segments from newspapers or entertainment columns, and talk about groups and bands and talk about the music that we were playing at the time. And when Pier 1 went out of business, Chris Perry came over to me and said, hey, how'd you like to do the show? I said, yeah, I love it. So I continued doing the show. Sean was operator. And then Chris approached me and he said, he says, I don't want to pay Sean to come in there on a Saturday night. Why don't you operate? Why don't we show you how to operate? So they showed me how to operate the board. And I learned how to operate pretty quick. It fell into place because, to me it was second nature. It was just same equipment I was using as a DJ, a little bit more elaborate, but same principles. So I started operating and playing. And then Chris approached me and said, you want to record a couple of commercials? So I said, sure. So I used to go in and record a couple of commercials. So I became the guy who went in during the day and voiced commercials. And at the time, Wayne Norman was doing afternoons. And I started doing the dance party myself in 1999, when Jerry and Ray and Chris acquired the station. So I did the dance party from 1999 to just 4 years ago, to where we were acquired by, dance party I did it for 18 years. But in that stretch, Chris had asked me to, if I wanted to sit in and watch the guys how they did their shows. So I did. I sat and watched Wayne Norman, God rest his soul, great broadcaster. I learned a lot from Wayne. He told me about the broadcasting industry, different ways how he conducted his show, which is a unique individual. Sean McClellan helped me out immensely when it came to delivering the rules, regulations. It was like going to broadcast school, only it was a one-on-one, and it was in a condensed form of it. And I thank him to this day. Jim Gratton, another guy, a fountain of information, professionalism, and freely shared his knowledge with me. Between those two guys, gave me the confidence, the support, and what I needed to know in order to do what they did to a certain extent. Well, they came when Wayne Norman passed away, and that left their afternoon vacant, and they needed somebody to fill that void. Sean was doing mornings, Jim was doing mid-mornings, and he also had other duties. Sean had other duties as well. So I was asked if I wanted to do afternoon shows. Well, I was also a part-time electrician doing work as an electrician. I had been truck driving, doing things as a truck driver, jack of all, and still doing my weekend things and the dance party too. And so I jumped at it. I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I got into the afternoon show position, and I did afternoons for many, many years. For, I want to say, almost 15 years. Yeah.
That long?
It was, because mornings have been over. Yeah. No, wait, been less than that, less than 15 years, because I've been doing mornings for quite a few years. But anyway, that's how I fell into the job, really. And when somebody said, well, you never went to broadcast school? I said, no, I didn't go to... Chris Donchmal was another one. I'll shout out to our Chris Donchmal, who is an alum from CJLS, who also didn't go to broadcast school, but who was a great... And Gary, you're another guy, right? So there are many of us older guys who didn't, take the broadcast school route.
Isn't that, though, the best way to learn?
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes. There are two kinds of smart. Somebody can say you can be book smart or people smart, and I use those terms. To be book smart, you go to college, you can learn you can learn all you want to learn, but there's also that connection that you make with being people smart that you can never put a price tag on.
And your experience from being 14 years old, working, part-time at the Mink to then owning it and all of that. I mean, there's your foundation to where you are today with everything you've done.
Yeah. So so over the years of doing afternoons, I learned how to do interviews, conduct interviews. Technology shortchanged a lot from back splicing tape days. And you can attest to that. You can attest to how many days you spent, slicing, putting tape together, ripping reeds. Back when I first started doing afternoons, everybody wore many hats in radio back in that day. So you weren't only a host for your show. You were the guy who read news, the guy who read the weather, the guy who did the commercials. You basically did everything that you had to do. The technology was there and it wasn't there. Things were delivered through paper. We went through a lot of paper back in those days at the station.
Yeah, a lot of paper and reel-to-reel tape.
Reel-to-reel tape, yeah. And how many times didn't want to get too close to the demagnetizer if you'd hit the button and erase the tape that you... It was very important.
Done that.
It was very important to you. So, over the years, tapes went by the wayside. Things turned digital, became CDs, became computerized once the first computer, and we started using software to record. It kind of changed the way radio evolved. It quickly evolved. Chris came out to me one time and said, how'd you like to do mornings? And I said, well, that's a big lifestyle change for me. I have to think about that. So I started doing mornings. And Sean had told me, he said, if you get in a routine and you can stick to that routine, you will not have a problem with mornings. I followed the Sean McClellan routine of mornings for, getting up, doing your thing to get to work. And I, to this day, follow that routine. To do prep for a show, my show consists of, anybody who listens to my show in the morning, I talk about some pretty strange things. Gary, you and I over the years, we've garnered a few glares, sneers, laughs, and
but that's
office
all
trips.
Part of it.
It is.
Yeah, and I know for a fact the amount of time and energy that you spend and have spent putting into your program, into your show.
Putting it out. So let's start.
Put yourself into it.
3:30 in the morning, get up, get your shave, shower, do your thing, eat your and breakfast to me, 4 o'clock. I eat breakfast at 4 a.m. I don't eat a big breakfast. Sometimes I'll fry an egg or whatever, but your cereal, your toast, your juice, water, whatever. And I watch the news. I watch the news every morning. I watch the news from 4 o'clock until about 4:30, close to 4:30. And I'll leave before the last story usually. And I'm to work before 5 every day. Yeah. I'm in that building before 5 a.m. When I walk through the door, I start if I haven't finished prep for the day, and sometimes the news gives me an incentive for, a topic to talk about, or what happened in the world. And in today's world, people don't need, if you want seriousness, then you listen to the news, you watch the news, you can take that. I've learned that people need the lighter side of life, and especially in the morning. You need to know what's going on in your day, and of course news will deliver that at the top of the hour. But you need a laugh in your day, and you need to know that there's a strange thing going on somewhere, or a product out there that just doesn't make any sense, or somebody's doing something bizarrely foolish, something totally different, a product, and something different. And that's my goal. My goal is to introduce my listeners to something different, but yet keep it relevant, keep it local. There's always a local twist and a local flavor. Local is what I strive for, because I want to talk to you. I'm not talking to 50,000 people. I'm talking to you.
I know how many times over the years have we had phone calls or seen posts on Facebook of people listening to you in the morning and saying, "Oh my God, I had to pull off the side of the road on the way to work because I was laughing so hard at something you said." And that's that connection. You're making people laugh. They're getting up early in the morning, right? They're calling, "I don't want to go to work."
Yeah.
And they tune on CJLS and they listen to Hartley Reid. And they got a smile on their face, and they're plus the information that you give them.
One lady said to me the other day, she said, brought her in for a client in to record, and she said, "I can hear the smile in your voice."
Skip ahead to the current day. We had a chance to chat with the current general manager, Eric Weinhott, about his personal journey to the airwaves.
Well, sales has always been a passion of mine. So, in my early 20s, I get into car sales. So I spent 10 years in automotive sales. And no, don't hold that against me. But I had a lot of fun because I get to talk to people. And, you can... It's one of those industries that you can do very well at if you get out, you talk to people, and I enjoyed sales. I'll be honest, selfishly, what I really enjoyed was I could write my own paycheck. As much as I put into it, there was no cap on your earning potential. But I got to a point where I felt I just wasn't being challenged enough. Not that auto sales isn't challenging, but for me, I just felt like I had this itch that wasn't being scratched, so to speak. So I reached out to the sales manager who I knew personally at CKBW in Bridgewater. And I said, business-to-business sales is something that interests me. Do you have any openings? And he said, as a matter of fact, I do. So anyway, long story short, he hired me in sales. And that was back in 2009. And in 2010, we added another station to the Bridgewater market. That's our country station. So being a part of that journey, seeing how a station goes through the regulatory process to actually launching, and then offering our clients that second station when, up to that point, the only station in the market besides Halifax was CKBW. So it was a change for everybody. So that career kept me busy until 2015, when my boss at the time got promoted to head office, and they moved me into station manager in Bridgewater. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time. Great team. I learned a lot over the next several years. And then when we purchased CJLS in 2016, Dave Hall and I worked very closely together, manager to manager, as we started to incorporate CJLS into Acadia Broadcasting. So Dave and I had a very good relationship, a very good partnership. And, we worked very closely together. And then in 2018, internally, Dave had announced his retirement. And in 2019, my role got expanded to regional to oversee the operations here in Yarmouth. At the exact same time, 5 years ago to this day, we purchased CIGO 1015 The Hawk in Port Hawkesbury. So my role expanded yet again. So now I'm literally overseeing operations from one end of the province to the other. So To me, it's the challenge. I love being challenged. I don't like being bored. I joke a bored Eric is not a good Eric. And so me being challenged every day, but getting to work with very competent and capable and passionate people is what I truly love. I've only been in the industry for 15 years, and the change that I've seen in my, when you compare it to 9 years, short career, is unbelievable. But I've had the opportunity to work alongside of people that have been in the industry a heck of a lot longer. So you talk about how music gets played, and you talk to people that would have been in the industry 20, 30 years ago, and they had to have all their albums ready to go for their show. Like that was they'd have their stack that would go into the studio with them, but a part of their show prep was making sure that their music was ready to go. Firing off commercials, you'd have your stack of carts. So your carts would go in and they'd have to be in order. And so all of that. So when you think of it from a technology side of the business, the way the future or how the industry has evolved is so remarkable to me. And when I look at guys, again, that have been in the industry for so long, the changes that they've had to see is truly remarkable. I mean, the big change that I see now that's coming into some of our studios are fully digital touchscreen boards now. Like that's the way the future's going. A lot of my changes have been, more along the operational side, the people side of the business. That's a lot of the change, especially through COVID. That's the big change that I've really seen in my career. But it's still a fascinating industry. What I find is that your core, what makes radio stations successful, what's made CJLS successful for 90 years is being connected to the community. And those core values is what ownership hangs their hat on when we look at purchasing stations. Those are our core values. So that's why we want to continue those, those traditions. So you want to talk about corporate in the Maritimes, you think Irving. One thing I can say, Ocean Capital Holdings is who owns us. John Irving is our owner. The mandate from John to the president to the station managers, the station managers have the autonomy to run their own operations in the markets. Yes, there are policies and procedures that we go through as a corporation. Everybody goes through that. But from an operational standpoint, I have no interference from my boss to operate these stations how I see fit, within my budget, within my parameters. If something falls outside of my budget, I do have to, go and see, hey, I need this much money to go fix this piece of equipment. So I understand why people think that way. I get the question a lot, what's it like working for an Irving company? I have nothing but great things to say. They provided me an opportunity, right down to the point they support me on every aspect of my career, regular check-ins and things like that. And, when I look at operationally, if we did, and this has happened in one of our operations, had a tower fall over, we do have some resources to re-erect the tower or get the new technology in place relatively quick. So I understand the question. I never hide behind it, but my experience has been nothing but positive in my position because I'm not micromanaged and I have the autonomy to do what I feel is right for the staff and the community.
We can spend our time mourning the heavy losses to community media, Fred Hatfield, Don Parnell, Ray, Chris, Jerry, or we can share their stories at a time when all we have are the stories.
There came a point early on in your career at CJLS where you also took part of the afternoon, the noon hour, and really transformed that, again, putting your own personal stamp on that. Talk about that, would you?
That was a show called Rainy at Noon, Gary, and I recall our station manager, Grant Wyman. I was at CJLS for 5.5 years, probably at about the 3-year mark. He came to me and offered me a new challenge, and it was to host the morning show from 6 to 9 and then do this noon hour show, noon to 1, Rainy at Noon. He called it infotainment, a bit of information, a lot of entertainment, and whatever was on it was whatever we could come up with for that day. And that, to me, I would never recommend that kids today, if you want to get in this business, go to journalism school and get your degree and do it the proper way. But that, for me, was my PhD, because you never knew what was going to happen. And it also is where you debuted one of my favorite impersonations of my lifetime, your Marlon Brando Godfather impersonation, which you would do for me probably once or twice a week, and it always left me tear-filled and crying on the pavement there. It was fantastic.
With Nickerson. Now, I gotta tell you, Rainey, I gotta send Vito up to see you, for payment for that. So expect a knock on your door sometime.
The man still got it.
I'm rusty.
It's all right. It's still good.
You and I had a lot of fun. I remember one particular day I went down, that's when Tim Hortons was down below us at Centertown Square. I went in to get a coffee. And a couple of the ladies that were working there came over and said, "What in goodness names are you and Bruce doing early in the morning? We hear all this noise upstairs." So I'll let you tell that story.
Well, the key to that, Gary, was to find a long song. And thank God back in those days we were playing Hotel California by the Eagles or American Pie by Don McLean or Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Lightfoot. Those are all about 6 to 7 minutes long. So I'd put the song on, and they were on 45s back in the day. And then I'd run out into the hall, and you would have a chair ready for me that had wheels on the bottom. And for whatever reason, you and I found it immensely entertaining for me to sit on the chair and you to push me down the hall at breakneck speed. And what I would try to do is I would try to eject just before I hit the wall. And we found this incredibly funny. The one day we didn't find it funny, however, though, is when I mistimed my ejection from the seat and put my size 12 Nike through the drywall that was just outside the studio, and you and I were looking at a gaping hole in the wall at about 6:30 in the morning, knowing that the bosses were coming in 2 hours later. So we decided after a lot of discussion, neither of us could drywall the darn thing. We weren't very handy. We'd just tell the truth, and thank God there was a sense of humor in the building that day.
And I remember I used to time you, because you used to run too. You used to run from the control room way down the hall around to the bathroom, and I would time you.
Yes, we would. We took this seriously. I think we even bought a stopwatch for this. And, you would challenge me. I think 11.49 seconds was my record. I wouldn't hit that today. I'd be about double that today. But that was back in my fleet of foot days. But, yeah, you know what? And that's part of, Gary, with that morning show, you and I were in there every day, just you and me, and most of the time the great Wayne Norman, just the three of us for about 3.5 hours every day, just the three of us. It's the ultimate sort of team bonding thing. And if you don't get along with the other people, then that's just hell. But we really got along, and we really found ways to make it fun both on and off the air. And, man, I remember those years with such immense fondness. It was just a great time.
So happy birthday to Radio CJLS. Looking forward to the century celebration just 10 short years away.
I'm Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Gary.
And this has been Outside My Window.